My friends who have been following me just on my own adventure, you guys know I went to Fresno, California this last week to go be a part of an evangelism training. It was wild. This came up because our previous pastor, Lance, who now works for the Northwest Baptist Convention, he called Mike, our current senior pastor at my church right now, and said, "Hey, would it be cool? Do you think Andrew should go to this training that Mike went to back in February?" And Mike was like, "Yeah, that'd be great." So they asked me if I wanted to go, and I said yes. I'm sure you're like me. You probably desire to be a part of something larger than yourself, that you yourself probably desire to see lives changed. We as Christians, we talk about the gospel and we constantly talk about how it's life changing and that we should see people just turn their lives to Jesus, as they are on one trajectory, their entire lives change course and they go down a completely different path than what they were already on because of the gospel. And I bring this up because life changes because we share the gospel. We share the good news of Jesus. But then there are times that I get distracted, churches get distracted. There are times that we look at church and we go and realize that it's a good thing that we're supposed to be a part of. And we go and we get away from the main thing, that we get lost in the social aspects of church, or we get lost in the hype of worship, or we get lost in maybe even nitpicking other people and their theology. And we start to just forget that it's about connecting others to Jesus so that God can change their lives. And then we are given the ministry of reconciliation. We are given the opportunity to share this great news with other people and see people be saved. And when I say saved, more than just being saved and like from their eternal damnation, but I'm talking about marriages on the brink of divorce being healed. We're talking about relationships between parents and children being healed. We're talking about even like financial stewardship, people turning their lives around, getting their acts together because they have encountered the gospel. I just crave to be a part of that. And sometimes I look around and I think to myself, what's happening here? Why does church sometimes feel like we're just going through the motions? This is why this training was incredibly exciting for me, because I got to go visit a church that has developed a culture of just unleashing their people to see life change happen on a regular basis. It was an opportunity to go visit a place called Clovis Hills Community Church. And I got to meet with their senior pastor, Dr. Sean Beatty. And he's done this amazing job of creating a culture in which people are laser focused on the gospel and they're seeing lives be changed. They've done this amazing job of creating moments and letting moments land and bringing significance to when lives are changed. And it was fun. It was good to go down and see what they're doing. So my adventure started, I think it was like Friday morning. I had to fly down to Fresno, and I was pretty surprised. When I think of California, I typically think of San Diego or Los Angeles. And when I got to Fresno, it was hot, like most of California is, actually probably all of California, but it was flat and it's rural and there's a lot of farmland. So I just wasn't expecting to see no skyscrapers at all. We got on our rental car, which that was a crazy experience. The car that we rented chugged along, like it would want to stop in the middle of the freeway. So we had to turn around and return that. That was a wild adventure. That was crazy. And also, driving in Fresno is crazy. People do not care about pedestrian laws. Like people just step out in the middle of the street. So there's one moment where we were driving down a road, just a normal street, and the guy on a penny board just darted out in front of us. Like it was obvious that we were going to hit him unless we stepped on the brake. But this guy was like, "Yeah, dude, I'm just going." So that was a crazy experience. So anyway, so we went Friday. We just basically, it was the day of getting all these different pastors together and waiting for them to arrive. And we got to just meet all these other pastors I got to meet all these other pastors from the Northwest Baptist Convention, other sister churches here in the Pacific Northwest. And we got to have dinner with them, get to know their story and build camaraderie. Say, we're all here to learn how can we lead our churches a little bit better in evangelism and sharing the gospel. The real meat and bones of everything was, it was probably like a 5-6 hour day on Saturday, where we sat down in a class and we just heard this guy's philosophy on how he leads and how he has developed a culture within his church to be able to share Jesus on a regular basis, to encourage his people to do that. And then Sunday, we went to multiple campuses just to see him play this out, to see what it looks like on a small scale and then on a large scale. And I say scales like that because they have multiple campuses and we went to one really small church. I don't know if you know this or not, but I think it's somewhere around like 70% of the churches in America are only about 50 people. So like when you see these huge churches with like hundreds of people, like thousands of people who are attending, that's actually a small percentage. The average church is only like I said, 50 people. And it was rad to see his philosophy play out with such a small group of people. And then to see it be scaled up to their home campus, which probably had 2 or 3, 4, 500 people at the one service I went to, maybe not 500 people, maybe 300 people in a single room. But what was I saying? So Saturday we went, and this is my biggest takeaway from this. His presentation basically revolves around the idea of culture. It's not necessarily about strategy, it's about culture. And the reason why we address culture is the same reason why when we help people make changes in their own life, we actually want to talk about habits and not necessarily like goals, right? Maybe you've read some of the new books out there, like The Atomic Habit or The Power of Habit. People who have goals, you have a goal. Maybe you have a goal to read your Bible more often, or you have a goal to gain muscle mass, or maybe you're just trying to, I don't know, save money. And we all have goals, and maybe you make SMART goals. And so you break it down to specific actions and things that you should be doing, which is all great. But what we have learned over the course of time is when it comes to behavioral science, I guess, that if you address habits, typically not goals, loose. Like one of the reasons why we don't hit the goals we hit because we don't address the habits that we have. Okay. At a larger scale, culture will always beat out strategy within a church. So his presentation actually revolved around the idea that maybe as leaders, we think, okay, hey, we want to reach 10% of my hometown, Longview. We want to see X amount of people come to know Jesus. That means we're going to train these people. We're going to give them this gospel presentation. We're going to teach people how to share Jesus. We're going to challenge them to do this, and we're going to send them out. And hopefully we'll see more and more people hear the gospel, get saved, and see their lives genuinely change. That's great. And maybe there's a strategy that's built around that. But the point of his presentation is that if we don't actually address culture, if we don't establish culture, if we don't intentionally build a culture where we celebrate the good news of Jesus, where we celebrate people coming and recognizing these significant moments when people are giving their lives over to Jesus, when Jesus enters their life and changes them. If we don't celebrate these things, if we don't have moments where we point back and see a difference, if we don't create a culture based on that, whatever strategy we have, it's going to fall by the wayside. So that's one of the reasons why you'll see like churches, and I'm guilty of this, that we will have like initiatives. Hey, we're going to start this new program. We're going to start this new thing. And we're going to try over and over again to see more life groups start or more people come to know Jesus. But if we don't actually take the time to build culture, if we don't address culture, then the current culture, whatever bad habits are there, they're going to sabotage the strategies that we want. One of the things he talks about then is that we should recognize that every church, every body of people, we all have traditions, and traditions are the word tradition is like a buzzword for churches. Oftentimes you will hear people say, oh, we're at a traditional church, so we don't do pews, we don't do hymns and all. That's not necessarily the traditions we're talking about. That is a tradition, but traditions are typically just things that we do. Like they're the habits we have because at one point in time they had meaning or there's a purpose behind them. And when I bring this up, that means every people group has traditions. And if we have traditions, that means every people group has a culture. For good or for bad, we all have a culture. And if we're going to help people, enable them to see life change in the church, if we're going to see these people come to know Jesus, if we're going to see people rise up and grow and obediently follow God and experience the life that he has for him for their good and his glory, we need to intentionally address the cultures that we have and then build the cultures that are biblically based. Okay. A couple of thoughts on it. if we're going to do that, one of the things he shared is that we have to do that thinking long term. I know for me, the tendency for leaders is we want to speed run everything. I've actually been thinking about a small group I have, a huddle that I have, and I've been thinking about their growth and their development. I'm so excited for the things I see in their lives. I'm so excited to see the growth that's happening in their lives. And I keep thinking that, man, maybe in the next few months or the next year or so, they're going to be ready to mentor and to lead other people. And some of them will be. And then I was thinking, the more I thought about it, maybe I'm pushing that too hard. Maybe I'm speed running this, or maybe I'm not letting things grow the way God wants to grow. Because sometimes, actually a lot of times, God moves in ways that are much slower than I would like them to move. And I need to calm down and think through that. So with that said, I just realized that like some people are going to be ready for that kind of a challenge in a huddle, but other people, they might need more time. So the point, I guess what I'm getting at is leaders like myself, we tend to not pay the price of time. And time means also being consistent, like pushing forward and talking about things over and over again and bringing them back to the forefront of our minds and leading well. So if we're going to build culture, I know for me, we got to pay the time. He said actually that it actually takes about 2 years to see culture take hold. And then it actually takes up to 4 years for it to truly become a value among people. That's a crazy concept to me, because what that means is this: if you are looking to teach people to celebrate people coming to know Jesus, one of the things he has is, as a church, when during their services, when people go up for an altar call, it took him a while to get people to celebrate that, because we typically see that as a negative thing. We see that as, oh no, someone, or not a negative thing, but we see that as an embarrassing thing or a hard thing. And it is to step up front like that. But somehow he was able to build a culture where it became a positive step of bravery to step in front of hundreds of people and say, hey, I need Jesus. And then he taught the congregation to affirm people, to let them know that this was a significant moment in their life, to celebrate with them when they came forward to receive Christ. That takes time. And listen, I know for me, if we were to do that right now, I feel like that would be really awkward, because we're just not used to that. And that's the thing. He knows that it's awkward, or at least he knows it was foreign. So he taught it, he pushed it, he banged the drum for several years. And that was inspiring to me to know that, man, if I'm going to lead, I need to be consistent. I need to be in it for the long haul, and we need to push forward with that. He also helped me see that if you're going to build a culture, there are 4 elements to building culture. For the things that he brought up were, if you're going to build a culture, you need traditions. Traditions in this sense are the things that we do every week, every quarter, every Sunday service. So if you go to a church, if you go to my church, think about what we do. Every week we have announcements. We read the Bible. We start off the service by reading God's word. We declare it. One of our traditions is we have people stand to honor the reading of God's word. I'm pretty sure there's probably a lot of people who don't really understand how that honors God's word. We just do it. That is a tradition at some capacity. And what are those traditions pointing towards? So his whole thing is, if you're going to build culture, especially for evangelism, for sharing Jesus in your church services, what are we doing that actually points people towards evangelism? If we're going to build culture for anything, for everything, that's a good question for how are we building traditions for discipleship and life groups, community, evangelism, all that stuff. But traditions, like what are we tangibly doing over and over again to build stability, to build expectation, to point towards a value over and over again? So that's one thing. The second thing is that people need celebrations. If you're going to build a culture, you also need to publicly celebrate the things that we value. So in this context, for the gospel being shared, we're going to celebrate when people come to know Jesus, more than just a baptism service, but like when people have a specific moment where they come forward and they do something and they declare Jesus, we're going to celebrate that right there, right then. And we got to we need to let that moment land. And I think that's the issue, is that sometimes, especially for me, we're part of things that we're scared to express. But if we were to collectively do that, makes it okay. It doesn't make it okay. It allows for moments to land and so people can know how significant they are. Life is full of just precious moments. And there are many moments in our lives that escape us when we don't realize how significant of a moment was. And so by celebrating, we help reinforce how significant things are in those moments. And the third thing was axioms. So basically sayings that push people forward. They're like handles. One of my favorite sayings is embrace the suck. When I work out, we do things like that. It's a mentality that I have. It's a mentality. So sometimes there are sayings that we use that builds culture. So we go, hey, this is why we do this. This is the attitude we should have for that. And then the last thing he says is that there are artifacts. And artifacts are like physical, tangible things that when we look at it, it brings us back to the moment of significance. So actually in the Bible, in the Old Testament, we would call those Ebenezer's. There were these moments that God told the Israelites, hey, build up these statues or these stacks of rocks, and they're called Ebenezer's. And basically every time they looked at this memorial, it would remind them of a significant moment. It would remind them of when God was faithful. That's an artifact. One of the things he talked about in their church is that they have artifacts. They have physical, tangible items that they give to people to remind them of the significant moments they had. Again, we're specifically talking about salvation. We're talking about accepting the gospel. We're talking about Jesus entering into their lives and profoundly changing the trajectory of their entire life. So those are the four things that he says that if churches are going to build a culture of evangelism, that's what they need. They need traditions, they need celebrations, they need axioms, they need artifacts. So what does that mean for us here? Well, as a church, man, that's what we want. We want to be a church that reaches people. We want to be a church that celebrates the significant things that are happening in the lives of other people that God opens the doors for. We want to see people come to know Jesus and be profoundly changed by that. Man, I hope you're like me. I hope you resonate with me with the idea. I want to be a part of people being changed forever, over and over again, having breakthrough moments over and over again. And that has everything to do with sharing the gospel. It has everything to do with the gospel being declared and people obediently living that out as God changes them, as God leads them on. So what that means is this, because I could sit here and people aren't going out there and sharing Jesus. They're not sharing the gospel. They're too distracted with doom scrolling, or they're too distracted with, the world and all these things, which could all be true. But it's up to leaders like myself and our elders, our pastors, or pastors of any other church out there. It's up to us actually to set that culture. If we are leaders, then we need to lead. I know for me that when I go to conventions or when I go to trainings like this, I get super hyped up and I get excited and I start talking about things. And I don't always communicate everything that I'm thinking. As a matter of fact, even tonight, I don't really feel like I'm communicating everything that I'm thinking and seeing right now as well. But I want to get started. I want to get better at this. I want to start disseminating the information that I have, because if we are going to lead, then we need to start this conversation. We need to start the conversation, and we need to get more information out there so that people are asking questions and we're all having a conversation about building culture together. And so we need to start talking through it, and we're going to start talking about, like, how do we be more intentional about building culture, but so that people aren't left in the lurch, so that people don't see that it's just coming out of nowhere. I think it's my responsibility just to get as much information as I possibly can out there amongst people so they know what's going on. So that's the point of this. So if you've made it to the end of this live stream, there are 2 people on right now. Hello. And you're thinking, like, what can you do to help, or how can we move this forward? I would say this: be praying with me. That's my prayer right now. I'm praying that God would get a hold of the hearts of our people within our own church, to press upon us the desire, the hunger to just share the gospel, to partner together and see people come to know him. I would also pray then that as leaders, that we would be diligent to heed the wisdom of getting it in, going for the long haul of getting things done, to not speed run, to not microwave results, but to do it diligently. And actually with that, I would ask that you would pray for our leaders to be focused, to say yes to the right things and no to the right things as well. And honestly, actually, it would help me out if you ask questions, if you have comments on it, if you have pushback. There are a lot deeper things I should have presented here, but I think maybe I'll just work on that and look through my pictures and get ready to talk a little bit more about what happened during the Fresno trip. But I guess that's it in a nutshell. Is that in a nutshell, I went to go see what it takes to build a culture. And I came back realizing that there's a lot of work to do. And part of that work is just getting information out so we can start discussing these things together. And I think there's going to be a lot of good discussion that comes from this. If you see me around, ask me questions and let's start talking through this stuff, you know? So anyway, that's what I went through. And you know what? I'm pretty sure I'll probably be making more videos as the week goes on, just to share other things that happened throughout the weekend. But yeah, I'm just trying to get more information out there. So anyway, thank you for tuning in and I will catch you later.